Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A United Nations inquiry has accused the government of failing to uphold the rights of disabled people in a whole range of areas, from health and housing to work and education. Along with its damning conclusion, the committee made over 60 recommendations on how to improve things. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, reports.
This year, Jim Lynch lost his right leg to gangrene, amputated at the knee. And now, gangrene threatens the other.
So that's your heel on your left leg now?
In his heel, the gangrene has taken hold, his toes also infected.
The left leg's as stable just now, but it's in a bit of a state, especially on the heel.
But that started in hospital when he was in 9 Wales. That one was okay, so that was a new thing when he was in hospital.
Minus one leg, with gangrene now in the other, he got home from hospital in April to find his social hours had been cut. They're used to get him out of the house with the support he needs.
It just gives him a life, because right now he's a prisoner in his own home. It just gives him a life because he can't go out by himself. He needs a carer there, so he can't go out and do normal things like we do, going to cafes, doing shopping, meeting up with friends. Unless they provide a carer to take him out, he's a prisoner in his own home.
It so happens Jim and Jackie live in Kirkcaldy, but the victims of cuts in care support exist, as we all know, from Lerwick to Penzance. The UN says the Westminster Parliament has the final obligation to meet disability rights across the UK, and it isn't doing it. The UN accuses the Cameron and May Tory governments of causing a human catastrophe.
Social cut policies has led to a human catastrophe in your country, totally neglecting the vulnerable situation people with disabilities find themselves in.
Jim Lynch's chronic health problems stem from diabetes. His brother put in a homemade ramp so he can at least get to and from the garden.
There's not much room to get about the house itself. It's very, very limited.
This is the living room, but Jim would just sit in his chair anyway.
This area here?
And
yeah.
Just watch the telly. And then when he's to get ready for his bed.
Right.
That's his
bed
there.
The room, that's the bed.
That's
you want to swing round
his
there?
bed. And then when he does need to go to the toilet, this is his toilet.
Right.
So
very obvious thing, there's no facility for proper washing here at all.
No, there's none.
Today's updated UN report is deeply critical of all aspects of the UK's social care cuts. 2 positive findings, 72 negatives. Among concerns raised by the UN committee are the impact of austerity measures, the negative impact on the standard of living of persons with disabilities, and the tightening of eligibility criteria for disabled people when it comes to benefits. Like tens of thousands of disabled people and carers across these islands, Jim and Jackie just want their needs met and no more.
It's mental health, it's the depression. He's got enough with his ill health without sitting in there festering, and that's what's happening day in, day out. It's not a life and it's not fair.
Fife Council declined to comment on the issue of social hours provision, but said we are working
to identify the most suitable housing solution to meet his long-term needs.
His few vital hours of social support do allow transport and help to arrive so Jim can get out and go to the gym. Time at Kirkcaldy Leisure Centre, working out, vital for mental as well as physical health.
It's a few precious hours out of a house which has become a prison. And that's helping him, he says, keep depression at bay. And he's keen to stress there are thousands of people up and down the UK in exactly the same position who, because their hours have been cut, are less and less able to get out, get some independence and look after themselves.
We came to Kirkcaldy, we could have come anywhere. Jim's grinding struggle, one of so many in a UK which the UN says is failing the human rights of its disabled citizens. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News, Fife.
Well, we did ask the government for a response. No minister was available to come on the programme. But in a statement, they said they were disappointed with the report and that it does not accurately reflect the evidence we gave to the UN. We spend over £50 billion a year to support disabled people and those with health conditions, more than ever before, and the second highest in the G7. We're committed to furthering rights and opportunities for all disabled people. And they said 600,000 disabled people had moved into work over the last 4 years. Well, I'm joined now by Jared O'Mara, the newly elected Labour MP for Sheffield Hallam, who has cerebral palsy. Jared O'Mara, it's a damning report, lack of facilities, people being kept isolated and excluded effectively from taking part in society. Do you recognise that?
Absolutely, absolutely. The report is actually 17 pages long and it's very concise at that, but it's very damning in the things it says that the government aren't doing. And the most basic of things, it's about access to accessible housing, access to appropriate levels of state benefits so that people can lead equal lives, people can have access to food, and people aren't thrown through the rigmarole of having to have a work capability assessment to try and prove exactly how disabled they are, to try and prove that they deserve the pittance of money that they get through this new PIP system and through this new ESA system. And there's disabled people suffering all over the UK, but you don't hear these stories in the mainstream media. You ask any Labour MP about how many constituents they have emailed them about benefits issues, about social care issues, they'll tell you numbers in the hundreds per year.
Yes, but
and that's no overestimation.
But the difficulty, you talk about asking any Labour MP, you're a Labour MP yourself now. I mean, campaigners say Labour's own record on disability cuts in the past few years has been shameful. MPs abstaining on cuts to PIP, as you mentioned it, personal independence payments, and Labour peers too. Exactly, and
I'm not making any defence for that whatsoever. And it's time now for things to change. And our last manifesto was great, and we talked about ending austerity and putting loads of investment into areas like the welfare state and public services and the NHS. And we need to move forward with that now. And the next manifesto, we've got to talk about increasing disabled people's rights even more. And I'm here now and in Parliament, and I intend to work towards that goal, and I intend to work towards a better manifesto.
The government say that they spend £50 billion a year at the moment, more than ever before. Would a Labour government spend even more? And where would you get that cash from?
I certainly hope so, and if you want to know where this magic money tree is, as a soundbite that the Conservatives use, well, quite simply, it's in tax evasion woods and it's in tax avoidance forest. There's loads of money. We've got a GDP, according to IMF, in 2016, of 2.69 billion. That's more than Spain and Australia's GDPs combined, more than twice the GDP of Russia. We've got loads of money in the world's loads of money. Yeah.
Sorry to cut across you, I'm going to have to...
50 billion, it's a drop in the ocean when there's 1 in 4 people have a disability.
Thank you very much.
A UN committee has described the situation for disabled people in the UK as a human catastrophe and said it has more concerns about this country due to funding cuts than any other country in its 10-year history. Theresa Desjardins has warned that the austerity measures are affecting 500,000 disabled people, each one losing between £2,000 and £3,000 a year. The most acute concern, she said, was on limitations on independent living, but she also said Britain was failing to fulfil its commitment to allow inclusive education, and a growing number of disabled people were living in poverty. Well, joining us now, Tracy Lazard, CEO of Inclusion London. Nice of you to come in, and you gave evidence, Tracy, to this report. Is it a fair assessment of what life is like for people in Britain?
It is absolutely a fair assessment. I mean, the deaf and disabled people's organisations that contributed are very happy with the concluding observations because it does reflect disabled people's experience. I mean, this is a damning verdict by the UN on the UK government's failure to protect and uphold disabled people's rights. There's no other word for it. I mean, the UN Disability Committee have produced a 17-page document full of concluding observations and recommendations, and the committee could only find 2 examples of positive government action. The rest of it is page after page of serious concerns, and those concerns are wholeheartedly shared by disabled people. I mean, the situation where we have the chair of the committee saying that the welfare reform and social care cuts are a human catastrophe for disabled people is shocking. But although it's shocking, it won't come as a surprise to disabled people because it is our lived experience.
And yet the government, who obviously we invited on tonight and declined, says it doesn't reflect the evidence it gave to the UN. It fails to recognise, the government's words, progress that has been made to empower disabled people in aspects of their lives. Do you see any of that progress? Do you see their attempts?
Not at all. I mean, I was there in Geneva and it was frankly embarrassing watching the government try and maintain a position of denial where they're saying that frankly everything is fine when there is a mountain of evidence now and our own lived experience that is saying actually something terribly wrong is happening. So the government needs to use these concluding observations as a wake-up call and show a bit of humility.
Is it about this government in a particular patch, if you like, of austerity, or is it successive governments? I mean, what do you see as being at the root of this?
Well, disabled people's situation is a combination of historic exclusion and discrimination, but the situation since austerity kicked in means that all of the achievements of the disabled people's rights movement over the last 40 years are being systematically dismantled, and that is the conclusion of the UN committee.
And you can say that here tonight, and the UN can write it, but this is of course non-binding. The government has dismissed it because it thinks it is doing the things that are creating progress. Where will we be then in 12 months, Tracy? If the government thinks it hasn't got a problem and the UN can't force it to change, what happens?
Well, you remember social care. Back in the November budget, social care was not even mentioned in that budget because the government were trying to pretend that everything is okay. And yet, come May, it nearly, toppled the government. And we believe this is the situation with disabled people. The government have consistently dismissed us, I mean, showing disdain for disabled people and the evidence that points to something badly going wrong. And they can't carry on like that. They just cannot carry on denying the problem that we have.
Tracy Lazard, thank you. Thanks for coming in.